So, let's talk about a country that's dealing with a classic double-edged sword, Algeria. We're diving into the story of how a nation's greatest strength, its incredible natural resources, can also become its biggest vulnerability, and the massive effort underway to write a new chapter.
To really get what's happening in Algeria, let's start with a question. Just think about it for a second. What if a single industry controlled your country's entire fate? I mean, everything, the national budget, its ability to take care of its citizens, all of it riding on the price of just one thing. What could possibly hold that much power?
And boom, here's your answer. Over 90%, let that sink in, over 90% of Algeria's exports are hydrocarbons. That's oil and natural gas. Everything else the country produces and sells to the world, from food to manufactured goods, is crammed into that tiny little sliver of less than 10%. This one single number is really the key to the whole story.
So, that leads us right into our first big topic, what we're calling the hydrocarbon dilemma. Because when one industry has that much control, it creates a very specific and very dangerous kind of economic roller coaster.
The official term for this is hydrocarbon dependency. But what does that really mean? Well, it means the country's economic health isn't really in its own hands. It's not decided by its own brilliant entrepreneurs or its hardworking people. Nope, it's decided by wild price swings in global markets that are happening thousands of miles away. It's a tough spot to be in.
And wow, if you want a picture of what that dependency looks like, check this out. This chart, using data from the IMF, shows Algeria's government budget. Look at those insane swings, from massive deficits way down here to tiny surpluses up there. This isn't just a little up and down. It is a true fiscal roller coaster, and the tracks are made of oil and gas prices.
Yeah, it really boils down to a pretty simple and pretty brutal equation. When the world decides to pay less for energy, Algeria's national piggy bank basically gets smashed. And this doesn't just mess with government spreadsheets, right? It directly impacts the lives of millions of people and shakes the very foundation of the state's relationship with its citizens.
And you've got to understand, all that hydrocarbon money, it's not just sitting in a bank. For decades, it's been the fuel for an incredibly ambitious social contract. This is the government's core promise to its people. We'll give you stability and support, and in return, you get a share of this incredible natural wealth we all own together.
And believe me, when we say that promise is ambitious, we mean it. We're talking social insurance for workers, cash assistance for the most vulnerable, and universal benefits like free healthcare and free education for every single citizen. And on top of all that, things like food, fuel, and water are heavily subsidized. This system isn't just a nice to have, it's a pillar of political stability, and it's all built on that oil money.
But, and this is a big but, here's where that promise runs into some hard numbers. Take one of their main cash transfer programs. The monthly payout is just a little over $22. That's only 15% of the national minimum wage. So it raises a really tough question. Even with this wide net, are the benefits actually enough to support people, especially when the whole system is tied to that unpredictable budget?
And there's another massive crack forming in the foundation. A staggering 42% of the Algerian workforce is in the informal economy. Let that sink in. That means nearly half of all working people aren't paying into the system. The funds for pensions, for unemployment. That puts an incredible amount of strain on a system that's already getting thrown around by global energy prices.
Okay, so if the old model is on shaky ground, what's the plan? Where do you go from here? Well, that brings us to the real heart of Algeria's strategy right now, hitting the road to diversification. The mission is to build an economy that can finally stand on more than just one leg. The government's whole strategy really comes down to three big moves. First, you got to find new ways to make money that have nothing to do with oil and gas. Second, you have to make it way easier for your own people to start and grow businesses. And third, you need to open the doors and convince foreign companies to bring their money and expertise into the country. It's a pretty clear roadmap.
And look, this isn't just talk. They're actually doing things. You can see the theme here, right? They're going digital with taxes and creating online portals to slash through red tape. At the same time, you've got new laws for land and a new legal status for self-employed folks, all designed to unlock private investment and bring that huge informal economy out of the shadows. These are the real nuts and bolts of how you try to change an entire economy.
So you could see, Algeria is at a real crossroads. It's stepping onto a new path, but a path like this is never easy. It's absolutely filled with immense opportunity, but there are some very serious risks ahead. The country's future is literally being written right now, as we speak.
And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. This quote from the International Monetary Fund says it all. They're basically saying, in very clear terms, that the current model is unsustainable. It's a stark warning. The IMF is waving a big red flag, saying, what you're doing now won't work forever. You have to change. The stakes just couldn't be higher.
Which brings us to the final and most important question. The entire story we've just walked through really boils down to this one thing. Can Algeria pull off this monumental shift? Can it transform from a state that's funded by what it digs out of the ground to one that's powered by the creativity, the hard work, and the innovation of its own people? The answer will define its path for generations.